Today, you mention the word plastic and people think of pollution, toxicity, etc. It wasn't always like that. When the first plastic was introduced, it was met with reverence. Let's go back to those days of yesteryear. We're going back to 1846. And the location is Switzerland, in the kitchen of Swiss chemist Friedrich Schwarcz. According to reports, he used to take his work home with him. And his work involved nitric acid and sulfuric acid. And one day, he happened to spill these on the floor in the kitchen. Luckily, Frau Schwarcz wasn't home at the time. But he figured he better clean up this mess. So what did he do? He grabbed his wife's cotton apron hanging on the wall. And then he had a wet apron on his hands. He decided he better put it up in front of the fireplace to dry. Fireplace, apron. The next thing he noticed was this. The apron went up in a flash with virtually no smoke. Now that was interesting. He didn't know what had happened. Today, of course, we know. The nitric and sulfuric acids combined with the cellulose in the cotton to form cellulose nitrate. Well, when cellulose nitrate was combined with a material called camphor by Alexander Parkes in England, that gave rise to the world's first plastic. He called it Parkesine, and it was a wonderful new material. You could make all kinds of things from it. Like this, looked like ivory. So you can imagine why it was welcomed. In the United States, John Wesley Hyatt independently came to the same conclusion. He called his material celluloid and founded a whole industry. One of the famous items made of celluloid was the comb, and beautiful material, again, looking like ivory. There were many things that could be made out of celluloid. One of the most interesting ones were gentlemen's collars, because in those days, men didn't change their shirts all the time. They wore vests. All they had to do was to change the collar. Celluloid collars could be easily washed. But there was a problem with celluloid. The problem was it was flammable. So you couldn't get too hot under the collar. But anyway, it became a huge industry. It was indeed the first celluloid or first plastic until it was later replaced by non-flammable materials like cellulose acetate, bakelite, etc. Schwarcz himself had another conclusion that he drew from the apron. It produced virtually no smoke, and in those days, people were searching for smokeless gunpowder because original gunpowder made from charcoal, sulfur, and saltpeter produced a lot of smoke. And when a soldier fired it, there would be this cloud of smoke hanging over his head, giveaway of his location. But Schwarcz noticed that the apron went up with virtually no smoke, and eventually he took cellulose and processed it into gunpowder, so-called smokeless gunpowder. Let me show you what that's all about. Here we go. Beautiful flame, no smoke. And that is the gunpowder that is used today. All traces back to that day in 1846 when Schwarcz's wife's apron went up in flames without a puff of smoke.